Welcome to the CyberWire's Research Saturday podcast, brought to you in part by Collide, endpoint security powered by people. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Research Saturday. I'm Dave Bittner, and this is our weekly conversation with researchers and analysts tracking down threats and vulnerabilities, solving some of the hard problems of protecting ourselves in a rapidly evolving cyberspace. Thanks for joining us.
So Log4Shell hit us on a Friday evening. We almost immediately started seeing spike in what looked like exploit attempts for it, and started getting down to identifying the ways of blocking those attacks.
That's Tushar Richabadas. He's a senior product marketing manager at Barracuda. The research we're discussing today is titled Threat Spotlight: Attacks on Log4Shell Vulnerabilities. And now, a word from our sponsor, Collide. Collide sends employees important, timely, and relevant security recommendations for their Linux, Mac, and Windows devices right inside Slack. Collide is perfect for organizations that care deeply about compliance and security, but don't want to get there by locking down devices to the point where they become unusable. Instead of frustrating your employees, Collide educates them about security and device management while directing them to fix important problems. Visit collide.com/researchsaturday to sign up today. That's KOLIDE.com/researchsaturday. Enter your email when prompted to receive your free Collide gift bundle after trial activation. And we thank Collide for sponsoring our show. If you've spent a lot of time and money fighting automated attacks but still feel like you're losing the battle, you're not alone. The truth is, bad bots adapt in seconds and evade expensive, difficult-to-maintain defenses. Now there's a better way with Casada. Casada has flipped the script on bots, ending the game of whack-a-mole. Casada's elegantly simple yet superiorly effective approach puts the burden where it belongs, on the attackers, not your business, stopping bad bots for good. Casada takes just 30 minutes to deploy and shuts down malicious automation in real time with no manual setup, no annoying CAPTCHAs, and no complex rules to manage. Casada stops the bot attacks others can't. Start today with a free instant test at casada.io/cyberwire. That's KASADA.io/cyberwire. And we thank Casada for making it possible to bring you Research Saturday.
It was a bit of an ever-evolving situation, given that there were multiple vulnerabilities that were being targeted. So it took a few days to get a hold on everything, given that the disclosures happened slowly. But we were soon in good shape, and we were able to identify and block these vulnerabilities.
Well, let's go through the research here together. One of the things that you highlight is where these attacks are coming from.
So the majority of attacks always look like they come from the US. This, again, is because attackers just need a bunch of IPs to rotate through. They need machines to infect from. So a lot of the traffic ends up coming from some hosting provider or the other. In fact, there are a few persistent IPs that don't show up in this list because they don't make up that much traffic. But then after looking at the data for so long, we almost instinctively know that this one is coming from this cloud provider and has been trying this same payload for a very long time. And for some reason, it hasn't been shut down yet. In terms of the others, it was a little surprising to see so much traffic originating from Japan. We normally don't see that in our traffic patterns, but outside of that, nothing massively different from previous vulnerabilities like the exchange vulnerabilities and so on.
Now, help me understand here. This is sort of the first step of a multi-step process where these initial intrusions would come from these IP addresses, but then payloads would likely come from somewhere else?
Yes, the initial access, it looks like the attack itself will come from one specific AWS machine, but the payload itself will be delivered from some other website that has been compromised to host the payload.
Well, let's go through some of the examples that you all have here in the research. I have to say, as I was reading through, I laughed out loud on the first one here. I'm just going to quote the research. It says, for the first one, let's look at a relatively benign or, depending on your viewpoint, very annoying payload. What exactly did you find here?
So it is interesting to see someone essentially pushing a Rickroll video link in the payload. And I had to play the video at the first few seconds of it. It almost seemed like it was predestined, but it is nice to see when you're going through an entire sea of other exploits to see this one. Someone is clearly having fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So just for clarity here, this one will take you to a YouTube video, of course, playing Rick Astley's Never Gonna Give You Up. So Rick rolling you, which, I mean, I suppose if you're going to point out a vulnerability to someone that they have in their system, this is about as benign as a way as you can do it, right?
Yep. As benign as you can get.
Well, let's move on to some more serious ones here. You highlighted one that had to do with crypto mining.
This was one of the first crypto miner payloads that we saw. It was a Monero Miner. It ranked quite high in the number of payloads being pushed our way in the first few days. The actual payload was available on that website for quite a while before it was taken down. I think it was almost 2 or 3 weeks of it being up before it was taken down. Interestingly, it has been more or less the miner payloads have gone down. The crypto miner payloads have gone down since then. I was looking at the data just now before we got on this recording, and I noticed that they're among the lower pushed payloads, but it's mostly that Kinsing malware, the Kinsing miner rather than Monero or any other miner that was initially seen in the early days.
Do you have any insights as to why that may have fallen off? I mean, is it just a matter that at the outset it was low-hanging fruit?
Yeah, I think we still have a lot of people looking for low-hanging fruit. There is, if you actually look through our installations and honeypot logs, we are seeing massive amounts of noise for log4shell still. And most of it is the same payload over and over again from various sources. We are not seeing very targeted attacks. So people are still being very opportunistic and just spraying and praying, essentially.
Well, let's move on to the next example here, and this was targeting VMware installations. What did you all find here?
So we didn't see too much VMware traffic. There was a little bit, and I'm assuming that VMware installations, most people don't expose them on the internet, and it's probably going to be more of an insider threat. We saw some lower levels of probing for VMware with these log4shell vulnerabilities, though. I do see off and on in traffic those probes, but not as much as the other payloads.
And then the last one you highlight here is some DDoS.
Right, and that is the biggest part of the traffic that we see now. If you look at all the exploits being delivered through all these automated scripts right now, we are seeing a large number of Mirai and Mirai variants being delivered. It is quite interesting given what we heard yesterday about the US government going after another botnet and bringing it down, essentially shutting down a botnet, which was probably going to DDoS, create a large DDoS attack. The fact that so many people are trying to build out Mirai botnets and to use for later is definitely interesting.
Yeah, it absolutely is. What are your recommendations then in terms of protecting against these sorts of payloads?
So the first thing is always plan your upgrades. These things come out and strike you at times when you don't expect it. So you need to have defense in depth, but having a plan in place to upgrade your software, making sure, and it is a moving target, making sure that you are addressing that is an important part of your security posture. As always, having that cover of a firewall, a web application firewall, or a web application firewall service that can stop these types of attacks is definitely useful, and it also gives you that cover while you actually do the upgrades, you figure out your plans and so on.
Based on the information that you all are gathering here, the traffic that you all are able to monitor, where do you suppose we stand when it comes to Log4Shell vulnerabilities? I mean, is this a case where we had an initial flurry of activity and now we've sort of settled into a baseline, or does it come in waves? What are we looking at these days?
So this is interesting, and I'll probably use another example instead for this. There is this one IP that comes from Russian ISP that does probing of various installations that we see every now and then. And it does it in waves. On one day, it will be going after a PHP vulnerability. On another day, it will be going after the Laravel vulnerability. If you look at Shell Shock, the original explorations stopped fairly soon. But for years later, we still see spikes in the traffic. Now, Log4Shell is essentially considered one of the biggest vulnerability complexes that are there, and dare I say, one of the biggest addressable or exploitable vulnerabilities. So I think we will see continued probing in waves as people start looking for new ways to exploit systems. They're going to come back to Log4Shell and probably find some vulnerable installations along the way and cause havoc. It also bears to note that people are getting better at patching and protecting their cyber installations. So you're going to see attackers look for that one hole that they can get through at all times. And in this case, Log4Shell is a very attractive hole.
Yeah, I mean, is this a case where if someone is willing to put in the work, that it's achievable to have the defenses in place to protect against this?
Yeah, if someone is willing to put in the work, it's eminently defendable. We have the upgrades required to block it. We have all the vendors who put out patches to protect against the traffic, so it's very defendable. It's a matter of time and effort for the defender to get it done.
Our thanks to Tushar Richabadas from Barracuda for joining us. The research is titled Threat Spotlight: Attacks on Log4Shell Vulnerabilities. We'll have a link in the show notes. Thanks to Collide for their sponsorship. If you have Slack, Collide is the perfect solution to improve endpoint compliance while educating your employees about device security. Try it out for free at collide.com/researchsaturday. Thanks to Casada for their sponsorship. To learn more about how Casada can help you stop the bot attacks that others can't, visit casada.io/cyberwire. The Cyberwire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland at the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing Cyberwire team is Liz Irvin, Elliot Peltzman, Trey Hester, Brandon Karpf, Eliana White, Puru Prakash, Justin Sabi, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next week.